Alright, so what I'm going to talk about right now is group riding. It's very windy today, so it's a little bit harder to hear than usual, so I apologize for that. One of the major things about group riding is you need to really be riding in groups where you can trust the people you're in. That's the most important thing. Trust the people you're with. That's the most important thing when it comes to group riding. Because if you can't trust somebody who's in front of you or behind you, then you really can't be riding with them. Now, in a lot of cases, there will be a new rider and an experienced rider riding together. Maybe the experienced rider is teaching the new rider, or it just kind of worked out that way. In this case, if it's just two people, there are pretty much equal disadvantages to putting the new rider in front and putting the new rider in back. I personally choose to put the new rider in front, as long as they have good directional ability. That's the problem. If they don't know directions at all, then you really can't have them in front, because they're not going to be able to guide you where you need to go. And especially if they're new and they don't know directions well, then they're going to be trying to pay attention to where they need to go and not concentrating on riding the bike, which at that point in time they need a lot more concentration for. So depending on the rider, in front I think is better, but in back is also fine. Just as the nice street glide or road glide, as the person in front, you need to, if you're the experienced rider and you're in front, you need to keep in mind that you can probably brake a lot harder than that newbie's going to be able to. So keep that in mind and judge accordingly. Last thing you want to do is be putting yourself in a spot where you're stopped in the road because of an obstacle, and the newbie rider runs right into the back of you. That's not good. You don't want that to happen, obviously. So avoid that from happening by stopping accordingly. That's a throughway. So do that. The other thing is, you definitely want to make sure that you, if you're behind them, and this isn't even about new rider necessarily, but when riding in a group, maintain a good distance. Definitely tell a new rider if they're behind you to maybe stay even a little bit farther away than they otherwise would, because that way it gives them ample time to see you braking and for them to brake, so they're not putting both of you in a bad spot. So that's definitely one thing you want to do. Another thing is, make sure you obviously hold your lane positions well. You don't want to be right behind someone. Try to stay on roads that have lines, because they're generally all the same width, and it gives you plenty of room to ride staggered like we are. Thin country roads don't always give you this luxury, so even though you want to stay on the back roads with a really new rider if you can, try to get on back roads that also have lines. It's better in the end for them. So do that. Alright, so the other main thing is, make sure that the other rider knows at least the general area and directions and stuff you're going, because if they don't know at all where you're going, it just makes it that much harder for them. If you accidentally throw in a late blinker or you brake a little bit hard for a turn, they're not going to know what's going on. So if they at least vaguely know the names of the roads, it's just an advantage. It just helps. It doesn't really solve anything specifically, but it can just make it a little bit easier. Another thing is, make sure that, what I personally like to do is, if you're in a bigger group of, say, 4 or more people, when you start to get to the people who are like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th in a group, tell them to throw their high beam on, because what that does is it lets the lead rider see all the lights a lot more clearly. By the time you get 5 lights back, it's hard to see, and it can make for an annoying situation. Make sure you ride staggered, like this distance is good. I'm sure by the camera it's not really that easy to tell. An unexperienced rider would want to be a little bit far back, but two more experienced riders right around this far apart at 60-ish miles an hour. 70, 75, 80, depending on your highway speeds and stuff, you might want to be a little bit farther apart. That being said, if you're in a lot of traffic, it's actually better to be closer. It's a little bit more, it seems more dangerous, but the last thing you want as a car to try to slip in a gap like this, because on rush hour traffic and heavy traffic, a car will definitely try to get in between the two of us if we're on a 2-lane, 3-lane road, 4-lane, 6-lane, whatever. So you definitely want to keep that in mind. Make sure you're also riding to the roads. And that's another good point. If it's really wet out, get a little bit farther apart maybe. If it's off-road, if you're on dirt or gravel, get nice and far apart, especially when going downhill. If you're riding in a group, and a lot of like group bike guys will understand this one. If you're riding in a group, going downhill on really slippery surfaces, the last thing you want to do if the person in front of you falls, the last thing you want to happen is for you to get dragged into that because you're right behind them and you run right into them. So now you've got 2 damaged bikes, possibly 2 hurt people, when you could just have one, and make an overall safer situation. So keep that in mind also when you're off-road. And other than that, for the lead rider especially, with bigger groups, 4 people, 5 people, 6 people, make sure that you're trying to time your lights as good as you can, and that's one of the hardest parts. You see a stale green light, and it's just hanging there. You can't just stop for it, but yet you don't want to go, but you just got to try to make the best of it. And if it turns yellow, that's up to the group, the riders in the back of the group to figure out, okay, can I make it, can I? And then if it turns red, obviously they need to stop. And then the group just needs to pull over, and then you need to regroup once the light turns green for the people who got stranded. That's about the only thing you can do. Otherwise, it's just not safe. So that's one of the most annoying situations, actually. It's one of the hardest to account for. Well, I don't have too much to say on that. All the other stuff, like hand signals and stuff like that, learn your hand signals, and just generally learn the person. Some people, I hate to say, I would never ride with because I just don't trust them. You've got to trust that person. You've got to trust them with your life. So keep that in mind.